I know a lot of people said, when I upgrade my car, it's kind of like a pyramid, everything ends up sounding like the same V12. That is hopefully no longer going to be the case. There's going to be so much variety, and hopefully I can't wait for everyone to jump in. You're taking off in lower gears, because it goes,
it's reacting to it, yeah.
And then as you're in higher gears, it's kind of turbos. It'll go from being kind of like a to more of a all the time.
Is this how you communicate what you want your team to do?
Yeah, I want it a little bit more rather than.
So, Mike, we're going to go over to you first before we deep dive into the nerdery. And I specifically want to know what's so exciting about the car sounds we're going to be talking about today in Forza Horizon 5.
In Forza Horizon 5, we have the largest car list we've ever launched with, hundreds of cars. And I am just super excited about the fact that each one of them sounds unique, it sounds different, it sounds authentic.
I want to know the most important question is, how do you make the sound for so many cars in a car game?
You can't have this many cars without having loads of good car recordings. We've actually been out and we've recorded and added over 320 brand new car recordings to our existing library, which means that we've got an absolutely phenomenal amount of source to make the cars sound as best they possibly can. So the cars in Horizon 5 are going to sound legit.
And to prove that, we actually have something we can watch now. We're going to unpack a little bit about how you recorded these because it looks incredible. So we're going to be showing this in the background. Unfortunately, we're going to be yapping over the top of it. So if you do want to watch a clean version, don't worry, there will be another one uploaded at a later time. But Fraser, what is it we're looking at here then?
So we're just looking a little bit at some of the cars that we've been out and recording over the last few years. It really did take the last 2-3 years to really sort of build everything from the ground up. We needed that extra time to really look at how we revolutionize how we were doing the cars, because it just takes a long time with the old process that we have. So we've got brand new processes in place, and as I mentioned, it really starts with getting really great car recording source. So with this many cars, we need to get out and source a lot of cars, like finding
I mean, you
people.
lot don't have these just in your garage,
I
just
wish.
ready to
I really do
record.
wish.
I mean, do you know what? They did actually record a Mustang, and then I found out the day after that they'd been at a racetrack with a Mustang, and I was like, guys, it's like...
Maybe it says something about the sound of your car. No, it's true. We'll get your car out and record it as well.
Thank you.
It does take a long time to source all the different people with all these different vehicles and get them to send us videos of like what they sound like, because every car, there's hundreds of variations of them, and they do vary in how they actually sound as well. So we want them to sound crisp and full of like all the frequencies that we want to try and record.
It's pretty incredible, right? The XJ220 is probably one of the rarest cars in the world, and it's just like calling somebody up and asking if we can borrow their car for a bit.
You just whack some microphones on it like it was no big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of my favorite car recordings that we've actually got in the game. It's such a rare engine, and it just translates so well into the game. And you sort of see that we're recording them out on an airstrip. We need that for various reasons, so that it's flat and you can record the car in a single gear going all the way up to the red line.
Consistent,
And
right?
all the way back down again. And you need that length as well, because if you're recording a hypercar, you maybe don't need it to be as long, because it can get up to top speed fairly quickly. Whereas if you're recording a truck like this, or an old banger or vintage car, then you kind of need a stretch of land that goes all the way up to Scotland, to be honest. So you do need the full length, and sometimes you even worry that you're going to go off the end. But fortunately, it's never happened. This was an interesting truck to record, actually, because you can see the engine is exposed at the back, and we have to do a lot of work to wrap muffling around the microphones to make sure that all of that wind that is traveling around the front of the vehicle and coming around the back you don't hear that in microphones, because it can sound really kind of distorted once you get up to top speed. Some of these cars can go really fast, including this truck. So we do take each car out, and each one is its own specific beast. Like, it comes with its own challenges. This one was different compared to, like, we've got these Lancias as well, which is cool. And we minimum probably go out with round about 8 microphones for each car, but sometimes we'll attach more if they've got really good transmission sounds, or if it's a hybrid car, we might make sure we're recording the electric whines on them as well. So it's a bit like a drum kit. You attach like multiple different microphones, and then once you get back to the studio, you can have a listen and see which ones sound the best at the different positions on the microphone and mix them all together. And this was really fun car to get out on the track. Really raspy, really kind of like quite violent, actually.
Yeah, I can't believe you guys got a Stratos. I like one that looks to be museum quality as well. It's like an absolute perfect condition.
Well, this whole thing just looks like a car nerd's dream. Was there any that was quite... I mean, you mentioned the Jag getting out there and filming that was pretty amazing. Were there any other highlights from this long session you were doing?
Absolutely. I mean, I think my favourite is the Morgan three-wheeler, purely because it's such a unique
car. Like it's basically, you know, it's a V2, almost like a motorbike engine. You can only fit one person in it. So normally, when there's like a passenger and a driver, we can get in the car and sit there and tell them exactly how to drive the car. Whereas a vehicle like that, you kind of have to just shove the recorder in and tell them what to do and hope that it sounds good when it comes back. But yeah, there's some really cool cars, and a lot of these people that bring their cars along, they'll be Forza fans themselves, so they'll turn up and they'll be excited to hear them in the game. So I'm sure they'll all be glad to see these.
If you need to do any pickups with a Corsa, do let me know.
Right.
I can be available at a moment's notice.
Noted. Mustang, Corsa.
There you go. Sorted.
Well, there is the Morgan Freely
There it is.
as well.
This was brilliant. I mean, you could hear this, the same volume down the end of the runway that it was right next to you. So it was just an absolute beast. It was so raspy. It's incredible.
It sounds like a World War II plane, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's cool. So we got this, and then you'll see coming up in a minute, we also went out and recorded multiple different types of Supras. So the Supra was an interesting one that we added to Forza Horizon 4. There was a lot of conversation around the sound of it. Does it sound stock? Like, is that an upgraded one? And honestly, we kind of never really had that concept of the two in a Horizon game before. So one thing we were really keen to do was try and get multiple Supras out and record. So this is the stock one that you can see here. Still sounded great, so absolutely terrific. Really cool sort of dump valve sounds on it. But then we actually got another Supra along to the same session, which just battled it out. And you'll see coming up in a second, they both were revving next to one another, and it really paints the picture of what it sounds like to upgrade your car from stock up to something else. The thing I loved about the upgraded Supra, there it is.
There they are, head to head. Let's go.
Whoa, listen to that. That would blow your head off.
Absolutely spitting fire there.
Yeah, we actually lost a few microphones to these.
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah, we've got a microphone cemetery somewhere in PG. This one sounded incredible. When it passed by, you just hear the kind of sounds as it goes past.
That noise exactly.
Yeah, and like all those sounds that we record in these cars across the 320 plus, we've managed to curate them and really make a massive library of source out of all that stuff as well.
So I suppose the big question in the room is, how does that turn into a game then? How do you take all the sounds you pick up from this track, these lovely folks who have these wonderful cars, and then how do we actually hear them when we play them?
Previous Horizon games, we were developing our granular hybrid looping technology. For anyone who's not really sure exactly what granular synthesis is, the old method was essentially a looping method which would take a car and it would put it in a garage on a dyno and get it to play back at, like, say 1000 RPM, 2000 RPM, 3000 RPM, and it was a computer that was doing that. So it was a fairly simulated environment. We chopped the loops out from those and then play them back. So there's a few things. They can sound a little bit like they're in a garage and not really out on track, and they can also kind of sound a little bit wrong when you don't get the engine rotations matching up correctly. So with our new granular synthesis, we actually take the recordings that we get out on track, having driven up to the red line, back down again, we chop each of the individual engine rotations up into a tiny little sample, and we end up with thousands of little audio files that we can play back in the game. And the benefit of granular is that it runs at 90 frames per second, which it obviously clocks faster than our game actually runs. And the cool thing about that is a lot of people will say the cars feel more responsive. It just feels like when you rev the controller, you're doing that in the game, and it feels far more like responsive, like you're in control of it. And that's what you're seeing there when it's 90 frames per second. It's just far more reactive. Something we've been working on for a long time, but it's taken a while to develop to the point where we could really ramp it up to using it across all these cars. So in previous games, we were maybe using it on, I'd say, about 10 to 15% of the cars, such as in Horizon 4. We're using it on 100% of the cars now in Horizon 5, which is great. They all sound fantastic.
It's something I know very fondly from the Forza community, is that they all love slapping on turbos and superchargers to their cars, and so I sort of have to ask on behalf of them if those have improved as well.
They have, so I think...
Wonderful.
All right, I'm off. Yeah, I mentioned that because we've been out and recorded so many cars, and especially something like the different Supras, they all come with different blow-off valve sounds. We've got this massive library of sounds now. All of that stuff I was telling you about, granular synthesis running at 90 frames per second. We've actually now got all the turbo whines, the supercharger whines, and all the transmission whines running through that same system. So all of that is super reactive. They sound really good, like up next to the car engines. And one of the cool things using this new modular system is that it actually allows us, when you're upgrading your car, to hear the different sounds of the turbos and superchargers as they're applied.
Now, as you're upgrading your car, you'll be able to hear those upgrades taking effect. So when you change the exhaust, the intake, the camshaft, you'll be able to rev the engine and hear the difference that makes to the sound of your car.
Yeah, so here you can see that we're in the player house in the normal upgrade flow, and you can go to your intake and hear, as you apply the different stock, street, race and sport performance modes, you can hear that actually change the sound of your car. And don't worry, I've talked all over the top of it, but we will make this video available afterwards.
Yeah, a cool new feature as well, you can now rev your engine from inside the garage. So as you're trying out these different upgrades, you can rev the engine and see exactly what it sounds like.
I'm also a big fan of the graph. Just going to say it. I love a graph. It sort of adds to how nerdy and wonderful this all feels.
So you can do it with your exhaust as well, depending on the upgrade paths per car. You'll be able to hear your exhaust note change. And it's important to point out that this doesn't actually it doesn't change the volume of the car, because then it would unsettle the mix. What it does is it actually changes the character of the car. So it sounds completely different, and it gives you that feeling of actually taking off a complete exhaust and replacing it with an entirely different manufactured part. And then one thing, this is one of my favorite parts of we've been working with the physics team really, really closely to introduce drivetrain flex back into the game, which is really cool. And that sort of gives you that wobble on the cars, so that as you're taking off in lower gears, because it goes,
it's reacting to it,
and then as you're in higher gears, it's kind of which is really cool. But
any more sounds of what it does?
Honestly, Charlie, he
Just
does
you
this
wait.
all the time. He's like that guy from Police Academy.
Unsufferable. And the other thing you would have seen there on the camshaft upgrades is a lot of people have picked up on the limiter behaviors in some of the cars. So as the car is bouncing off the limiter, if it's at a lower one, all the cars in Forza Horizon 4 used to have a set limiter behavior, so they would go like wow, 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 where they're up the top. Whereas as you upgrade it, you'll hear it kind of go wah, 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 when it's up the top. I knew
do
you
you
were
do
gonna laugh
this
at
in
me.
meetings?
All the time.
Is this
all
how
the
you
time.
communicate what you want your
Yeah,
team to
I
do?
want it a little bit more rather than
It works. I completely understand what you mean, so it's effective.
So yeah, as you upgrade your car on your intake, your exhaust, you will have seen there that we had, as you go through all the different turbo layers, the supercharger layers, the centrifugal superchargers as well, you'll hear all those changing in real time as you rev, as well as when you apply the stock, street, race and sport modes for each of the different turbos. It'll go from being kind of like a to more of a.
I don't think we could do a show without these now. I want you to know that.
There you go. I'm just going to be wheeled
Just
on for the
hop
sound
on.
effects.
Here's the sound of the week.
Just as an aside, while we're looking at this, I think it's cool to note that if you're wondering why the car looks so realistic, why it sits in the scene so nicely, it's because you've got ray tracing active as well.
So actually, I mean, does ray tracing affect anything audio-wise as well as visual while we're here?
It does, yes. So we have taken ray tracing and we're using it throughout the world. So actually we're sending out ray traces to detect walls, buildings and ceilings as well.
Like echolocation.
Like echolocation, we're using ray tracing to detect walls, ceilings, buildings, which means that you'll hear your car bouncing off of all the buildings around you, and that'll change with the environment. So when you're driving through Guanajuato, for instance, you can hear it slapping off of all the buildings. If you're listening with spatial audio, something like Dolby Atmos with your headphones on, you'll actually be able to hear your car bouncing off of the roofs as well, which is really cool.
What I love is that Like when you're in the city and it's like a really hard surface, you get that kind of crisp echo. Like when you're in the rainforest in the jungle, it's still bouncing back off of all the trees and foliage, but it's much more muffled, it's much more organic feel to it.
Every material in the game has been set up with a different absorption coefficient, which is kind of an acoustic term, which essentially says if it's concrete, then it'll bounce off more sound than it would if it's foliage or something like that, which actually absorbs the sound. So it's really dynamic to the world around you.
What about other players? Do they get to experience these changes that you've made as well within the cars?
Every other car that you race against will benefit from those as well, and it makes races just sound
I bet
far
that
better.
launch moment is, and you hear all the engines kick up, and you could just like name them all.
It's so effective, honestly. Like Fraser told me about it before I heard it, and I've got to be honest, I was like, yeah, I'm sure that'd be cool. And then, but then the actual experience of it it's so visceral and interesting, and you do genuinely hear like, oh, it's a V10, that's a V8. You can just hear every car going past you, or as you're going past them.
Yeah, it's really cool. And as your players drive past you, you'll hear all those upgrades that they've applied. So if your friend has applied a supercharger and you kind of want to hear that, you'll be able to hear that next to you as well. I think something to point out as well is that all of the AI cars and your friends around you, the sound of their car will be the exact same sound that your car has. So if two Lamborghinis pull up next to one another, they'll both sound the same. They're sharing the same engine, which I know is something that players had sort of mentioned in Horizon 4 before as a bit of an issue, which I'm glad to say we fixed that now.
That everything does indeed sound better on the Xbox Series consoles. Can you confirm how and why?
It's one of those things where, as much as we talk about the Xbox Series consoles, you tend to talk about how great everything looks, the amount of detail we've been able to add, how beautiful the world is. But the consoles actually unlock quite a lot of extra audio capabilities as well.
We've actually unlocked a new compression format which allows for much higher fidelity audio. A lot of people, I know in the clips that we've released already, I sort of mentioned the fact that it sounds a bit cleaner, sounds a bit more refined, and that's what you're hearing is actually the higher fidelity compression format. That if you're playing on an Xbox Series console and you're playing against all your friends who all have these granular engines, thanks to the modular system, you'll actually be able to hear more cars around you as well as more of those upgrades and turbo parts. So as they're driving past you, you hear all the flutters and stuff, which is great. Just adds so much character to the game.
I'm actually going to ask the first one because I'm the most important person in the room, and I want to make sure that we talk about convertibles in essentially every single episode. We already know that the lids go up and down, but do they change the sound of the car too?
They do.
They do.
Hey,
Yes.
there we go. I thought as much.
It's one of those things you maybe don't think about, but it's kind of a subtle shift. We kind of only had the concept of, was it a hardtop car or was it soft top? It was binary. It was either one or the other, which made it really hard for us to implement something like convertibles. Because we've completely revolutionized the way that we're doing car audio for this game, we've actually been able to implement the cockpit filtering, the cockpit reverb systems a little bit different so that actually if you're in a car with the top up, it'll sound all muffled, and as it comes down, you'll actually hear all the ambience and the wildlife really creep in. If it's raining, you'll hear that as well. And then that's another cool point, that Dolby Atmos, you'll hear that above you as it's going down. A little bit of a geeky point, but I quite like it.
It's brilliant. Full nerd. We absolutely love it. The next question comes from Forza Horizon World, and they ask, what is your favourite car sound that you've recorded?
I'll go first, and I'll say the Stratos. I think the Stratos is just a really cool, iconic rally car that I personally really love that car, and I think it just sounds absolutely fantastic.
I featured the BRZ because I just think it's such a cool, like, rumbly boxer end. It's just got a really nice kind of low end to it. I definitely picked my favourite engine to show on the stream.
Next question comes from Subterfuge Dog, who says, how do you keep the exhaust out of the muffling?
Exhausts can get really hot, like you just wouldn't be able to touch one. So we keep them a certain distance away. That sort of stops the exhaust being muffled by, like, being surrounded by all these microphones. It's a bit of a test and see what sounds good. So you kind of place it on, you'll drive it up and down. If it does sound muffled, then we'll probably just move the microphone and run it up and down again.
The next question comes from Jerp. Sorry if I've said that wrong. And they're curious to know why you've chosen to record in this way and not using the previously mentioned DYNO method.
There's a really important point, which is if you put a car on a dyno, then essentially you can basically only record the car when it's accelerating, there's no way to get that offload sound. Basically, it has no load applied to the engine. So as soon as you let off the throttle, the car's not going anywhere. So it basically just lets off, and the deceleration just disappears. So previously, a lot of the looping cars would actually play the same acceleration loops all the way up and all the way back down again. Whereas with the method that we choose, you can go out in the car in the environment that basically best simulates what the game actually looks like. You can take it up to the red line, and then you can actually decelerate from, you can be doing 120 miles per hour, and you can just get all the pops and bangs, all the natural like whine, and decelerations do sound like really different to accelerations on cars. So basically the short answer is to get all of that lovely character and detail, the pops and bangs and all the little sweeteners that we want to record.
The next question comes from DNK, who asks, so because the sounds have improved a lot, will the first-person car sounds be improved as well?
We've actually been recording cockpit impulse responses, which is a new method of doing reverb in the game. Essentially, we basically record a sine sweep from every frequency that the human ear can hear. So it kind of goes like whoop, up through the range. I know you like sound effects. And what that does is it captures how the cockpit of the car reacts at each of the different frequencies all the way up the frequency range. And that basically means that when you feed the exhaust and engine into that reverb, then it makes the first-person perspective sound amazing. It also benefits all the things like the tires that you can hear skidding on the ground, just like
the one outside.
All the tires screeching on the ground, all the kick up, all the water, all the rain, all the weather. As that plays through the cockpit, it just sounds like you're actually sitting in the vehicle that we've actually recorded.
Authenticity. The next question comes from Gab Reiser, who asks, the huge bridge that was seen in the E3 gameplay, is that part of the huge highway that you talked about in previous streams? Great catch.
It's actually not, no. The bridge is on a separate road that runs through and above the jungle region.
Okay, next question comes from Cragger Long Claw, who asks, will the Eliminator start covering the entire map?
So the circle is slightly larger. You can still pick any of the start locations, but then if that circle is in an unfortunate position for you, you may have to move quite quickly to get inside it.
You have to book it, yeah. Okay,
but an Eliminator game can use any part of the map, yes.
Okay, lovely. And then the last question, oh no, my apologies, there's another one there. So first of all, we'll do Boxfort, who asks, can we expect to see familiar Forza Horizon characters to return in Forza Horizon 5?
Yes, we
Lovely.
can. We have a bunch of returning characters, plenty of new faces as well. But no, we have some friendly faces. Alex and Jay are back. Scott Tyler, of course, is here, as is Amy Simpson on Pulse. Even Mike Steele is back again. we won't spoil why he is here.
The actual last question, however, comes from Hugh is Banana Gaming, and they ask, is there new engine swaps in the game?
There is. This is a great question.
They've all been great questions, haven't they?
They have been great questions.
Aw,
Well
you
done.
lot.
Well done.
Yeah, well done, community. It's like you knew the thing. It's like you knew the things that we forgot to say during the actual
today.
show.
It's great.
Yes, a really important piece that I wanted to mention is that we are adding over 500 brand new engine swaps to the game. So where it makes sense, you'll get potentially like a V10 Asian car on an Asian car that you're driving, which is really cool. I know a lot of people said, when I upgrade my car, it's kind of like a pyramid. Everything ends up sounding like the same V12. That is hopefully no longer going to be the case. There's going to be so much variety, and hopefully I can't wait for everyone to jump in and explore and see what we have to upgrade.
I feel like your mentions are going to be bombarded with people going, look at this mixtape that I put together of this car. Do you like it? That's going to be your whole, is just like approving other people's creations.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, there you go. Go do that. So those are the questions we all have time for today. But before we go, I want to see if we have any more information about any upcoming shows for people to get excited about.
Absolutely. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to be taking a dive into the world of Mexico. We'll be starting to look at each of the biomes in detail and and seeing what each one of those brings to the game. Looking a bit further into the future, we'll start to do a real deep dive into the car list.
Cars.
Yeah, obviously you've seen a bunch of cars today, but we'll start to go through the full car list in a future stream.
Wonderful. That sounds perfect. Mike and Fraser, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. The game, I confirm, does both look and sound amazing. And thank you everyone else at home for tuning in today. November 9th will be here before you know it. I promise, just wait a little bit longer.
Hey everyone, I'm Fraser Strachan, lead audio designer at Playground Games, and today I am so excited to show you a new feature called Audible Upgrades, where you'll be able to change both the intake, exhaust, and all other sounds on your car and hear it change as you do it. So without further ado, let's have a listen. So that's Audible Upgrades. I'm sure you'll have loads of fun configuring your vehicles in Forza Horizon 5 later this year. Now I'm sure some of you are wondering how we record the cars for Forza Horizon 5. Well, have a look at this video and see for yourselves. Well, I'm sure you'll agree that looks like a lot of fun, and I can't wait to join you all in Mexico later this year.